In the previous part of the Drawing Fundamentals Made Simple series, we've learned all the skills needed for accurate observational drawing. In this part of the series, we're going to learn all the skills for constructive drawing. Unlike observational drawing, which is more or less about copying what you see, constructive drawing is about analyzing what you see and building it up using basic forms. This will teach you to think three-dimensionally and train you to draw from imagination. By the way, if you enjoyed this lesson, be sure to check out the full Drawing Fundamentals course at mydrawingtutorials.com/basics. It's designed to teach a complete beginner all the basic skills they'll need to become successful at drawing. Okay, back to the lesson. Almost everything you'll draw can be simplified into three basic forms: the box, the cylinder, and the sphere. Whether the subject is a head, a figure, a still life, or a machine, it can be broken down into boxes, cylinders, or spheres. So, learning how to draw these forms is very critical. Let's start with the box. Now, I'm sure you already know what a box is, but bear with me for a second. The main characteristic of a box is that all the sides are either parallel or perpendicular to each other. That will be important later. A box has three dimensions: the height, width, and depth. A box whose height, width, and depth are all equal is called a cube. Simple enough? In order to draw a box well, we'll need to know some perspective. Perspective is the science of depicting three-dimensional space on a two-dimensional surface. Kind of like how a camera takes a 3D scene and turns it into a 2D photograph. And just as every photo is taken from the vantage point of a camera, every perspective drawing is depicted from the point of view of a viewer. If the viewer is a worm on the ground looking up at the scene, we would see something like this. If the viewer is a bird in the sky looking down on the scene, we would see something like this. For simplicity, during this course, we'll assume the viewer is a person on the ground looking straight ahead, not up or down, but straight ahead. In the drawing, the height of the viewer's eyes from the ground is represented by a horizontal line. This line is called the horizon line. So if the viewer is really tall, the horizon line will be higher in the drawing. And if the viewer is really short, the horizon line will be lower in the drawing. The reason the horizon line is important is because it determines how much of the object we are able to see. A higher horizon line will allow us to see more of the top of the box than a lower horizon line. Now that we established what a viewer and horizon line is, let's talk about an important rule of perspective called diminution. Diminution is just a fancy way of saying when something goes away from the viewer, it will appear smaller. I know, duh, right? But this rule of diminution does create some interesting effects. For example, imagine we're looking down at two parallel lines on the ground. These could be railroad tracks or lanes on a road. The important point is that they're parallel, which means the distance between the two lines are always constant. And even if the lines are extended indefinitely, they will never intersect. If these lines were not parallel, they would be angling in towards each other, and if they were extended, they would eventually intersect. Okay, back to the parallel lines. Because we're looking at these lines from the top view, without any perspective distortion, they will appear as regular parallel lines. But watch what happens when we view them from an angle. From this angle, the lines don't look parallel anymore. As the line goes away from the viewer, diminution causes the distance between the lines to appear smaller and smaller. As a result, the line seems to converge together, and by the time they reach the horizon line, they seem to vanish into a single point. This point is called, not surprisingly, the vanishing point. Now, you can see this effect at play in these real-life examples. There's the horizon line, and there's the parallel lines coming together at a vanishing point. This gives us another important rule of perspective. Parallel lines that are going away from the viewer will appear to converge towards a common vanishing point. For example, if we added a third line, as long as this line is parallel to the other two and is going away from the viewer, it will appear to converge to the same vanishing point. Let's do another example. Suppose we added another pair of lines, except these ones are standing vertically and perpendicular to the ground. Perpendicular is basically the opposite of parallel. Rather than never intersecting, the two lines cross each other at a perfect right angle. The letter T or L are examples of perpendicular lines. Now, since these lines are vertical and perpendicular to the ground, they will simply look like dots from the top view. In the perspective view, they will appear as parallel lines without any convergence to a vanishing point. This is because although they are parallel, they are not going away from the viewer, and therefore unaffected by perspective. Makes sense, right? Okay, that was a lot of information, so go ahead and take some time to let it sink in. Review the lesson as many times as you need, and once you feel like you got a hold of these concepts, meet me in the next lesson. Well, I hope you enjoyed this lesson, and if you did, make sure to check out the full Drawing Fundamentals course at mydrawingtutorials.com/basics. You'll get tons of additional lessons and step-by-step exercises and learn things like how to draw anything accurately from observation, how to construct and draw objects from your imagination, how to shade realistically, and a whole lot more. So if you're ready to improve your drawing skills, head over to mydrawingtutorials.com/basics or click the link below.